First, though, breaking tonight, we can reveal that nearly 60,000 illegal migrants and convicted criminals have been removed or deported since the 2024 election. Another 43,000 people left voluntarily after being told they were in the UK illegally. Those figures, of course, follow scathing remarks from President Trump and separate warnings from him that Europe is on the verge of civilizational erasure because of mass migration. So do you think perhaps that Trump's success in this area is a secret driving force behind the government's deportation crackdown? Let's discuss this with Matt Stadlen and Deputy Online Editor of The Critic, Tom Jones. Evening, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me. So, Tom, do you think that the British government has been inspired by the success of President Trump in this country to stop illegal migration on the border and to deport those people who shouldn't be here?
I'm not quite sure inspired is the right word. I think probably pressured is the word I would choose. Basically, I think Trump's victory has really kind of pushed the Overton window of migration, particularly around enforcement of legal migration. And I think that's basically creates a kind of pressure for other Western governments to deal with migration. They're obviously at the very cutting edge of, in terms of their toughness on migration. But I think they are kind of showing a way that other Western governments are going to follow.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think? Because obviously it's one of the things that Trump can absolutely celebrate here in the US. He says, I was elected to kick people out of the country who shouldn't be here. He's done it. It's a success. Is it that Starmer is following in his footsteps?
I wouldn't describe Trump's policies as a success, given what we've seen in Minneapolis. But leaving that aside for a moment, it was in December, I think, that policy document came out, and where the American administration talked about the risk of civilizational decline. And actually, a lot of these removals and deportations would have taken place before that document. I think this government realizes that if you are here illegally, well, you shouldn't be here, and wants to enforce the law. I also think that they are aware of the political threat of Reform UK, and they want to show that they are indeed enforcing the law. And of course, the crisis with the small boats is so visible that it's being talked about almost on a daily basis, isn't it? Often on GBNews, and the government realizes again, therefore, that there is an extra, to use that word, pressure is probably not the wrong word at all, actually, to realises that there is pressure to act.
I think that phrase that Tom used there about the fact that Trump has moved the Overton window, in other words, there were statements about illegal migration that just nobody uttered, and I think GBNews, as you say, has done a good job of making it acceptable for people to raise legitimate grievances about their changing high street, or the queue in the hospital, or the queue in the GP surgery when they arrive and they look around. There's a lot of people there who are not British born using those services. And how important has that been, though, Tom, that Trump has come out on the stage? We saw it at the UNGA conference in September, and we saw it in Davos just a couple of weeks ago, when he looks down the lens and he looks across the auditorium to the European leaders and he says, you are ruining your countries. It looks like they may be finally listening.
I think to a certain extent that's true. I think there is always a danger with Trump that he goes a little bit too far and becomes a problem for the European right because of how he treats Europe, particularly over Greenland. But I think, if you look at the way that Labour is talking about migration now, I think there's certainly a rhetorical convergence with Trump. The language, they're talking about restoring order and control, scaling up removals, doing whatever it takes. That echoes very tough law and order framing on immigration, even if I don't think they're going as far as Trump. I think even the emphasis on removals as a kind of performance metric is quite Trumpian, and the figures that have just been released by Labour are slightly massaged, and I think that's quite Trumpian, you know, to find the biggest possible definition of the amount of people that you've deported is a very, very Trumpian thing to do. So I do think Trump matters. I think it probably matters more in terms of theatre and rhetoric than in reality. But as I say, there is always that danger, particularly as Matthew touched on there, with the scenes in Minneapolis, that it becomes basically a no-go zone for the European right to roll out a programme of enforced mass deportations like we see in America.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Matthew Stadlen, Tom Jones there, thank you. Go on, Matt.
Can I just quickly push back very quickly on a couple of things? We are not ruining our country, Bev, with immigration. Millions and millions of people in Britain are immigrants or the children or grandchildren of immigrants. And to say that we're ruining our country is a really outrageous slur. You talk about people in the queue at the doctors. A lot of the doctors and nurses and hospital porters who contribute to keeping us alive and keeping us well in Britain are themselves either immigrants or from immigrant stock. So let's get that straight. And by the way, there was a chap you had on recently, a few minutes ago, I was watching, called Niall Gardner, who described our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who, by the way, I think did make a mistake in his appointment of Peter Mandelson, but to describe him as a traitor over the Chagos deal, and now backed by Trump, apparently, in his U-turn on the U-turn. And for you, Bev, not to push back on that, come on, Starmer is not a traitor. He's the Prime Minister of our country trying to work in the national interest.
What's in it for us? What is in it for us to give away the Chagos and pay for the privilege of doing so? Do it.
Yeah, I will. There was a non-binding...
You don't have to explain to me simply, because I'm not an idiot, but you can explain it to me because you're on my show, so go ahead. I'm not suggesting you're an idiot.
I'm criticising you for not pushing back on one of your guests who described our Prime Minister as a traitor.
Go on then, tell me. What's in it for us?
I will tell you.
Okay, I'm asking you... All right, Matt. I'm asking you the question that you want to hear. You wanted me to ask him. I'll ask you. What is in it for the UK to give away the Chagos Islands and pay for the privilege of doing so?
So there was a non-binding decision in an international court that said that the Chagos Islands should really belong to Mauritius. And the concerns let me just make the argument very quickly. The concerns, first of all, by the previous Tory government. No, because I want you to answer my question. I don't need an explanation of the legal backstory. I've heard that till I'm blue in the face. What I want from you, because we're not getting it from the government, and if you think Starmer is so fabulous for the UK, you tell me, Matt Stadlen, what is in it for the UK to give away the Chagos and pay for the privilege of doing so? I'm just explaining it to you, Bev, but you're interrupting me. Because there was this non-binding decision that could one day have become binding, then under those circumstances we would have found ourselves potentially in a very significant pickle, because guess what, this country still believes in international law. Donald Trump may not, but we do, and as a consequence of that, the government is actually trying to work in our national interest and the interests of our defence as well to make sure that that scenario doesn't happen. And for one of your guests to describe those attempts as traitorous is truly outrageous of him, and I'm really surprised, Bev, that you didn't pick him up on it, because if you think that our Prime Minister is a traitor, that's disgraceful.
Do I think he's a traitor? Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to Chagos, I am not seeing him present, and there are people in this town right now, who are ferreting around, going into offices in this city, trying to convince this administration, potentially lying through their teeth about the situation with Chagos. Those people will not come on this show, Matt. They won't talk to the GBNews viewers. They won't talk to the British public to put their case forward, the likes of Jonathan Powell, to say why they are here, convincing Trump to go along with this ludicrous deal so that we can apologise for our colonial past. They won't convince, they won't talk to the public about it.
Donald Trump, your argument then, and I thought you were rather a fan of Donald Trump, I'm not, let me be clear, but your argument is that the president is too stupid to understand that a deal that Starmer is striking, for which you think he is traitorous, he's too stupid to understand that deal.
I am saying that in a busy administration with a huge amount to deal with, when you take a representative from the government, if you take a British representative who is there in place of the Prime Minister, and Donald Trump will trust them, he will trust them on their word. Rubio, they will trust them. And when they lay out to them what it is that this means, they're believing them. And I think they're lying through their teeth about what this deal is. And I don't think they're being clear about what the implications are for national security in America. But you still haven't told me. All you told me is we've got ourselves into a little bit of a legal knot and Starmer's doing his best. That's absolute balderdash, Matt. You still haven't given me the reason, the logic as to why we're giving away Chagos and paying for the privilege.
So you and Niall Gardner are clever enough to understand this deal, but the British government is too stupid or too traitorous, and Donald Trump is too stupid to understand it. Last year in May, Marco Rubio supported the deal. Trump then, over the Greenland fiasco, which was outrageous, did a U-turn. And then today, to my surprise and to a lot of people's surprise, he's U-turned on the U-turn. But apparently your guest, who thinks that our Prime Minister is a traitor, your guest is clever enough to understand the problems, but Trump is too stupid. I thought you were a fan of Trump. That surprises me.
Niall Gardner is more committed to this topic and understanding it inside and out than anybody else in this city. And his argument that the needs of the British people are not being respected is completely worthy of listening to, and it is legitimate. So whatever the reasoning is, and you still haven't given me the reason why it is in the British interest to give away the Chagos and pay for the privilege. You can't tell me. I mean, you can't even sit there and say it's because we are disgusting colonialists. If you sat there and said, because we're disgusting colonialists and they deserve reparations, at least have the testicles to do that, Matt.
Because we don't want to find ourselves in a position where an international court forces us to give up those islands. Therefore, we wanted to strike a deal whereby we would be able to lease them for another 90 years.
Well, then in that case, they could come over here and they could say to Donald Trump, the previous government got us in a bit of a legal mess, which is not in the interest of the British public, and we need you to help us sort this out because you can nix it. And they haven't done that. So that's clearly